So no more.
No more saying horrible things, which we are live. Everybody heard me say no more
All
horrible
right, we are
things.
live now. Excellent. Hi, hello everyone. Welcome. We are here to launch a new book by excellent author and dynamite human being Virginia McClain, who you see over here, like rocking out. We have matching hair now, so twinning.
Woo! I just got way too close for a brand new dye job. You can see all the dye in my scalp. It's really great.
Extreme close up. We are channeling our best Wayne's World selves here.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know me, I am Amanda Cherry. I am a small press and traditionally published author of fantasy, space opera, urban fantasy, and role play games, and also a prolific convention stage host. So I get the honor tonight of making the interview questions happen to talk to our amazing featured author about her newest book. Hi, Virginia.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you so much for being willing to do this and saving me from interviewing myself.
I mean, that would probably be really fun, but the editing process is just a whole back and forth.
Well, trying to do it live would be really entertaining. I would have to try to do 2 different cameras at one time, which would be interesting.
Hilarious. Also, I have puppets for that. I actually,
yes!
I have Gobo Fraggle that I tend to use when I have to interview myself. But that's all right, because I'm here and you do not have to do that. The very first order of business that we are going to undertake tonight is that I need you to teach me and everyone watching at home how to pronounce the title of this book. Because I have noticed some coolness with the accent marks there on the front, and I guarantee that if I were to parse it into French or German, I would be wrong. So how do we say it?
That is a great question. And you're right. You'd probably, anyone trying to parse it using those languages as a base would probably get it wrong. So it's Sairō is the name of it's actually the wolf face on the cover. That's Sairō. And it's just this long O sound, Sairō. But then when you turn it into a title, of course, it's harder to hit that nice elongation and then move into the regular English word claw. So Sairō's claw. Would be Sairō's claw, yeah.
Everybody, so you just say it with me. Sairō's claw.
Sairō's claw.
All right, see, we can do this. Excellent. Now, this is the 3rd book in a series. Am I right?
Not quite.
So that was the follow-up. So it is the 3rd book in a world, but yes. Is this a good entry point to your storytelling? Is someone who picks up this book without having read its predecessors going to be happy and informed and at home without trouble following along with what's happening?
If I have done my job correctly, yes.
That was your job very well. So
that was the intent. So I don't have a copy of Sairō's Claw, physical copy yet, because Canada Post is really slow and there's a pandemic. And so my
came out February 23rd and I don't have a copy. I understand.
Okay. So yeah, and mine came out last week. Well, the physical copies were orderable last week. So yeah, so it's been, I don't have them yet. However, I'll show off these, the other books that are in Gensokai. This is Blade's Edge. It's Chronicles of Gensokai Book 1. And this is Trader's Hope, and it is Chronicles of Gensokai Book 2. And are these backwards? They look backwards.
No, I see them correctly.
You see them correctly. Great. That's perfect. So they are both sort of kind of standalones even in and of themselves. Like Blade's Edge finishes its plot, and anyone who reads it and doesn't particularly love the characters has no real reason to read the next book. The plot is concluded, and then there's still way more of those characters' stories to tell, hence the 2nd book, which follows the same characters from Blade's Edge in the same world and picks up days after the end of the 1st book. But that book also sort of tells its own story that then concludes at the end of Trader's Hope. Sairō's Claw is its own new story with new characters starting 7 years after the end of Trader's Hope, and is also the kickoff to a new subseries called Gensokai Kaigai, which I won't translate because it's a little bit spoilery. So if you want to look up the Japanese, you'll learn a little bit. But it's like teeny
I
tiny.
guarantee that someone
spoiler.
watching this at home has enough Japanese that they are able to figure that out.
Well, anyone who has enough Japanese is going to find it really obvious. But
something that I've learned about fans of fantasy work in particular, they're all really smart people, and many of them have diverse language vocabularies. And there is probably someone right now that's like, man, that was a spoiler. Good grief.
But no, that's the nice thing is it's like, it's such a tiny spoiler. It really doesn't matter. That's why it's, otherwise I wouldn't have put it in the subtitle because that would make it really awkward. So my daughter is asking me a question. And since this book is all about moms, I'm going to go ahead and take a second to answer it. Yes, Cedar? That's awesome. Can you go watch with that on? You're going to go in the fort. Okay, great.
Forts are important.
There's a fort behind me. It's a nice, it's one we built earlier. Cedar's apparently going to go in there. So life with kids in a pandemic. Here we are.
That actually is a perfect segue into my next question.
Okay, great.
What was this process like, getting this book written and revised and edited and laid out and in all of the things that you have to do as an indie author during a pandemic with a child at home? I know that my experience of trying to launch a book in a pandemic was ridiculous, and I would love to know sort of what were some high points, what were some low points, and what were some major differences you noticed from the normal world of getting a book out in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, this pandemic, if it has done anything, it has made me miss cafes. I got into a rhythm with my last few books, going and working at a nearby restaurant cafe, but they would let me, like order coffee and then just hang out for hours. And in other cafes, going to the library and sitting and working in the library, and all those places, I work so much better outside of the house. Even if I have internet access, it's not, place that is not home, not a bajillion home distractions from me, plus of course, child, etc. It's working outside of the house works way better for me. But that of course has not been an option for the last year and a quarter. So it hasn't been a year and a quarter yet, has it? No, because it's May. Almost.
My inside date was February 23rd. So
yeah, we were March 11.
Oh, that was my wedding anniversary.
Oh. Happy 2 lockdown anniversaries in a row. Sorry about that. So we were we've been locked out. So almost a year and a quarter. Anyway, without cafes. So I basically had to learn to work with way more distractions, which with ADHD, not the easiest thing. And I was not medicated for ADHD until June or July of 2020. I had been coping without, it's a long story about I had a teenage diagnosis that my parents had basically ignored, been like, no, you're not ADHD. You can sit down and read a whole book in a night, and you can sit down and crochet a hat, and you can, clearly you have attention span, not recognizing. And this was after a full psychological profile that they paid for because I was doing other intelligence testing for other other learning disabilities. And they accepted those. They were like, oh yes, you do have a math disability and you do have a punctuation disability, but no, you don't have ADHD. Okay. But I bought into it right along with them. And then just ignored it for 23 years and powered through as best I could, probably being way more stressed out by life than I would have been otherwise. Anyway, but in 2020, so much happened. Not long after both my parents died on the same day in June, I was feeling so overwhelmed with everything. I was like, something has to give. And I'd been following someone else's journey with ADHD and medication. And so I finally got an adult diagnosis and a prescription for medication, and started taking that prescription, and no longer felt like I was drowning on a day-to-day basis. And that helped a lot in terms of getting any work done at all, because I suddenly went from being able from not being able to focus at all, except in the wee hours of the night, if I was still awake enough, to being able to focus sometimes during the day if I really like put headphones in and focused, and my husband did his best to keep my daughter in a different room, and like I managed to make it work bit by bit. And I got better at it with practice and finding my footing with medication and exercise, and meditation has been a huge thing for me in the past few years, really, since my first bout with depression a couple of years ago. And all of that really, like, it takes all my all my coping techniques to make work happen in a pandemic. But I finally managed to do it well enough that I wrote this book. But the other thing that really helped was that I freaking loved writing this book. I loved the first draft of this book. I loved the second draft of this book, where I completely erased the first draft. I didn't actually, because yay Scrivener, I just started new sub-documents, but I would rewrite every single scene from scratch for the rewrite of this book, and I enjoyed the hell out of that. I just loved drafting this book so much. It was a nice, happy place for me. It's a fairly lighthearted book. I won't say it's a happy book necessarily. I mean, the premise is that the main character's wife is abducted, and then she has to go chase her abductors and like try to get her back. So it's, that's not like a woohoo fun, we're going on an adventure type deal. But it's somewhat that. It is there's a lot of banter, there's a lot of making the best of stuff, and there are some dark moments and dark scenes, but overall the feeling of the book, to me at least, is more uplifting, and that was important to me. I needed that desperately, especially the sense of humor, and especially embracing a bunch of tropes that I have, for the past few years of writing, kind of shied away from, just because I've been like, oh, but this is so overdone, and what do I have to add to it? And so can I even, I can't pull that off, because, it's, but 2020 was the year of me saying, who cares? Like, it's like overdone, schmoverdone. Like, what does that even mean? I love this thing and I want to write it, so I'm gonna.
But one of the good things about tropes is it gives us a happy home base, and it lets us set up expectations in a way that sets us up to be satisfied. Oh, I recognize this as XYZ. XYZ is the same as it was in all these other books that I've loved. And so I'm getting an XYZ. That's very exciting. It's the scoop of ice cream that you order, and you watch them scoop, and this is a good flavor because you've had it before, but maybe never from this ice cream parlor. But it's pralines and cream from a new ice cream parlor, and you're thrilled to have the experience. Right. So I always tell people who knock tropes that they actually don't know what they're talking about, because tropes are great.
Tropes are great, and I actually love them, and I always have. Like, if anything, I have sometimes really enjoyed twisting them and playing with them more than this, but it was more that the types of tropes that I chose, the types of tropes that are comfort tropes to me, I freaking love reading them, but I wouldn't let myself write them, because I was like, well, I can't do better than X, Y, or Z, right? Just like pick my favorite examples, and I'm like, well, I can't do better than that, so I shouldn't do it. But that's just dumb. Like, no, I can't do better than that. Like, I'm never gonna write a talking animal trope that's better than the talking badgers in everything written by Ursula Vernon, T. Kingfisher. Like, I adore the way she does that, and I can think of probably a dozen other examples that are super strong. And for the longest time, I made that like stop me from writing a talking animal character. And then this time I was like, no, there is a grumpy wolf spirit trapped in this katana, and I don't give a crap what anybody thinks. Like, I want to write this. I am writing it.
There you go. It's the cake meme, right? The author's like, oh no, my cake is not as good as that other cake. And the readers are like, oh, more cake.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So thank you for giving us a big chunk of salty wolf cake in this case, with a stabby salty wolf cake.
I like that. Salty wolf cake. Yes,
Salty
I'm going to
wolf cake.
refer to Sairō as a salty wolf cake from now on.
I'm gonna have to actually make a cake now and call it the salty wolf cake.
Salted caramel would work perfectly for that.
would
like
work
a nice sea
really
salt
well.
caramel. Yeah. I would love.
You know,
I would
wanna
love
go
to
bake
eat that.
something.
Sorry. You're supposed to go to bed after this.
I know, it's bad. So I believe it is time, my dear, for us to get a taste of what you have put in this book. I'm going to give you about 12 minutes or so to read some of this glorious story that is coming our way.
That should work. I think 12 minutes is lots.
If you're done before then, I will not penalize you.
Okay. I did practice reading. I just didn't time it because I forgot to time it. But I had a lot going on. I was making, oh gosh, I accidentally hit the thing.
I don't know what thing you hit, but don't do it.
I didn't. Sorry. It was, I brought up the YouTube stream of us with sound. And so for a second, I know.
For those of you watching at home on YouTube, what you do not know is that you are hearing us about 15 to 20 seconds after we are hearing us.
Yeah.
And you don't want both audio inputs at the same time.
It's not fun. It's very confusing. I am not a fan. But yeah, while I'm stalling for time as I bring up my my book here and flip it to the right page. But I will say that everyone who's watching, hi everyone. I see that Misty is here, which is Lois. Hey Lois, and David and I'm not entirely sure who else because I've now clicked away. And Raul, howdy, are all here. So hi everybody. And if any of y'all have questions, please put them into the chat and we will get to them in a little bit. And I'm sorry, my daughter is desperately asking me a question. Amanda, can you entertain people for like 90 seconds while I answer my kid's question?
Entertain people for a few minutes while you. Actually, what I am going to do is to remind everyone watching at home that we are here for the launch of Sairō's Claw. See, I learned how to pronounce it, and you can too. By Virginia McClain. This is the third book in this world, and yet it is a fine jumping in place. If you are unfamiliar with the world of this story, you do not have to necessarily go back and read books 1 and 2, although you can, and we invite you to. Never going to tell people not to buy books or request them from your local library. Libraries have budgets to buy books, and that helps authors just as much as individual purchases. You can support local independent bookstore through bookshop.org or pick up Virginia's work any place books are sold, like the big.coms.
I will add that unfortunately the hardcover and paperback through Ingram will be rolling out to bookshop.org soonish, I hope, but it's never clear what the timeline for that is. They are not there yet. I keep checking, searching via ISBN. And once they have rolled out, I will blast those links all over the place. For now, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and then a bunch of, like, for digital retailers, like all the digital retailers. Libraries do. It has rolled out to like McNally's, which is one of my local indies. And so your local indie may actually already have it in its listing, but it hasn't shown up on Bookshop just yet. So, okay.
Right.
So
tell us what we're about to hear.
So I'm almost starting at the beginning of the book. I am doing a tiny bit of skipping. I'm going to read 2 scenes with the same character, and they're the first 2 scenes of this character. There's another character that starts the book before her, and I could read those scenes, but they're not quite as action-packed. So I am skipping her scenes and just focusing on the one character. Plus, I think it's a little bit easier to just follow one character. So it's Kayo, and this is like the first time we meet her, so you're not missing anything from her storyline. The only thing you're missing is a tiny bit from a parallel storyline that you don't need to know in order to understand what's going on here, because they're separate at this juncture. So without further ado,
right, lay it on
us. There will be one brief pause in between as I shuffle past the next scene with the alternating character and go back to. I will say there are 4 POV characters in this book: Kaio, Raku, Torako, and Itachi. Itachi is the very small child, and there are only a handful of scenes with that are from her POV, but they're there. Okay, here we go with Kaio. First day, 6th moon, cycle 8 of the new council. Kaio. Kaio looked into the rolling mists and ran the small owl-topped seal through her fingers, tipping it absently over one knuckle at a time. The combination of sea air and cloud cover left a tangy moisture on her tongue that she might normally have savored, but today she ignored it. Instead, she focused the entirety of her attention on listening, beyond the creaking of the deck beneath her feet, beyond the bare whisper of the crew relaying hand signals up and down the afterdeck, straining to hear the enemy before they heard her, hoping that in doing so, she might live long enough to regret having volunteered herself and her crew for close patrol that morning. The near silence across the water stretched on, the fog muffling the sound of sails bending to the wind, gentling the already quiet slap of waves reprimanding the hull of the wind serpent. And well they might. For their scouts hadn't reported enemies within sight of the close patrol circuit in cycles. The most exciting part of this patrol should have been redirecting wayward fishermen from the mainland. Of course it would be on her watch that they'd sight another sail through the fog, far too large to be a fishing vessel, and not the faded blue of a Kaigun ship either. As she'd known the moment her lookout had called the word sail, all of her ships were accounted for. The stillness drew out like the tide, and her whole crew held ready. The only motion, the silent tip of her stone owl between her fingers, a motion she could not suppress, the only thing keeping her from screaming. Kaio's hands stilled as she caught the faint sound of something, muffled by the wind, the fog, and the waves lapping against the hull. She strained to hear, wondering if it had only been her imagination. And then the silence was shattered utterly by the unmistakable, terror-inducing crack of cannon fire. "Down!" she cried, silently cursing whatever ill luck had put her ship in the path of an enemy armed with cannons. A great splash of seawater coated everyone on the Wind Serpent's deck, but the shot was low, falling far short of the ship's hull. Kaio and her crew were in motion the moment they realized they were not dead. "Storm callers!" she cried, pulling herself to her feet and tucking the small owl-topped hunko into her pocket even as she reached for the dagger on her belt. She hoped they were a long way off from daggers and close combat, but her crew approved of a bit of dramatic flair, and she would do whatever she could to focus them on the thrill of battle rather than the terror of cannon fire. "Ready!" she called out, thrusting her dagger into the air for emphasis. She listened closely for the sound of the hatches sliding open on their spring-loaded tracks, transforming her ship from a seemingly toothless sloop to its true 30-gunned glory. "Aim!" she called next, wishing she could see the look of surprise on the approaching captain's face as the guns were run out of their hatches faster than should have been possible. "Fire!" she screamed, releasing the brunt of a full broadside on the massive ship that loomed above the Wind Serpent in the swiftly shifting fog. The guns cracked out as her crew timed their shots to the roll of the surf, and Kaio cursed whichever gaijin had invented the blasted things. They were as loud as they were devastating, and she wished they had never come into existence. But when the ships their patrols encountered had started carrying them, the Kaigun had had no choice but to adopt them too. Raiko could devastate any ship, cannon or no, but if one hoped to convince the enemy to surrender rather than merely die, one had to outgun them, which was precisely what Kaio planned to do. "Run us home, Raiko-tachi," she called, brandishing her dagger in the air and pointing it towards Kaigun-jima. "Let's see how well these gaijin like the answers they're looking for." And now I'm skipping to the next section. Kaio. It wouldn't be long before the 100-gunner had their answers, whether they liked them or not. The Wind Serpent flew through the waves like the legend it was named for, its sails so full it felt as though it was barely touching the swelling sea beneath it. Kaio had learned long ago that standing at the bow and laughing as the wind whipped her hair and the sea soaked her uniform would garner nothing more than odd looks from her crew. Besides, she was a captain now, and such displays were considered unprofessional. But that didn't mean she couldn't stand on the stern deck with the wind in her hair, the tang of sea on her tongue, and a lightness in her chest. Then she turned to look over her shoulder, and the lightness in her chest vanished. The 100-gunner was practically on top of them. If she'd been fluent in whatever foreign script had been used to name the vessel, she would have been able to read it from here. Kaio turned and shouted to all her kisoshi, calling for more speed, giving them the signal for the Raiko to manipulate the air around them and move the water along the hull, a tactic she rarely used this close to an enemy, but one which could not be avoided if she were to have any hope of outpacing them. She was relieved to see the distance between the wind serpent and the other vessel growing, as her kisoshi bent themselves to their task, but this distance did not grow as steadily as she would like, as though the 100-gunner had its own secret reserves that it called on now to propel it even faster. It was unnaturally swift for a ship of its size. Kaio frowned, calling again for more speed. In less than a candle burn, both ships had reached the much thicker fog that Kaio had been racing them towards, and she called for a final burst of speed that would tuck them neatly out of sight. Her entire crew gasped as the 100-gunner shot forward with its own surge of speed, just as the wind serpent was consumed by fog. Kaio smiled anyway. The 100-gunner might be closer than she had expected, or even thought possible, but her crew had kept them ahead of its guns, and now the massive vessel was well and truly caught. She almost laughed. Instead, she cried out for a sharp tack to starboard, and she and her crew cut between a narrowing gap of giant sea pillars that were nearly invisible in the thick fog, but which Kaio would likely be able to find with a blindfold over her eyes. It was a maneuver that was only possible because of the high number of kisoshi on her crew. Even the most powerful of Raiko wouldn't have been able to complete the movement alone. Just as her bow threaded the needle of the disastrous rock pillars, her signal callers cried out like angry pelicans, their calls amplified by wind kiso, and the returning calls from the pillars brought a small, bitter smile to the corners of her mouth. The 100-gunner sailed on, either because they hadn't seen the wind serpent tack or because they'd realized that following would be suicide. It was only a few heartbeats before the thunderous sounds of long guns and great guns rattled through the fog, splitting it with enough light and sound to wake the spirits and rattle the dead. Kaio wanted to cover her ears, but did not. The fog cleared, even as the terrifying crunch of metal-shredding wood assailed her ears, along with the screams of the dying. Kaio shivered, and it had nothing to do with the wind that now pushed the thick rolls of fog into little more than a low-lying mist. When the Kaigunjima Raiko had cleared the fog away completely, the foreign ship was already suffering another round of cannon fire. Kaio didn't take time to appreciate the crystalline waters or dramatic rocky pillars that lined her home harbor. She was too keen to watch the 100-gunner and see how they chose their fate. The much larger ship had already managed to angle themselves slightly away from the line of fire, but Kaio knew it would not be enough. The clearing fog had not only revealed the 100-gunner itself, it had also revealed the entire purpose of Kaio's carefully managed retreat. Beneath a sparkling sun, across the tantalizingly clear waters of Kaigunjima Harbor, sat row after row of ships, cliffs, sea pillars, and small atolls, all covered in cannon of every size, and all brought to bear on the foreign ship that had dared to breach their waters.
That was delightful. I mean, you had me at ship-to-ship combat, right? You know,
Yay!
where I was going to be on that. I'm like, yes, boats, more boats. Yes, Luke, tacking.
And the maneuvers are like completely unrealistic, but managed with a heavy amount of magic. So
it works. Like attack to starboard is a real thing, and then the fact that you have magic on board that makes that work no matter where the wind is actually coming from. Bravo, brilliant, way to go with the fantasy writing.
Yay!
Now, having heard those excerpts, and I'm so into it right now. The first and I think obvious question, particularly for those who are unfamiliar with you as a person, you lean sort of heavily on East Asian cultural influences.
Yes.
And you are not, by any apparent measure, an East Asian person. So can you give us the background that I know it, that led you to that corner of cultural reference, and why are you the person to write this book in that place with those influences?
Fair question. And I think part of what's important in that answer is that Gensokai, while heavily inspired by feudal Japan, is not meant to be feudal Japan and is not even meant to be an alternate feudal Japan, but is rather an entirely fantastical world inspired by it, much in the same way that feudal England is the inspiration for a number of other stories. That point made, I would say, yeah, I when I first wrote Blade's Edge, I was living in Japan, and yeah, and I was there for 2 years. And we lived in a remote part, well, remote by Japanese standards. We lived in a town, considered a town, called Tsuruoka. And it's a conglomerate of a few towns that had what's the word I'm looking for? Incorporated into a single city, but it was still very small by Japanese standards, but it's like 400,000 people or more. Like, but that's considered inaka for Japan, like, which inaka means like rural. And we lived there. Yeah, we lived there for 2 years, and I was constantly surrounded by these beautiful mountains, the ocean, and I spent a ton of my time. I taught in the evenings while I lived there, and I had the days to myself to adventure and explore. And so I spent a whole lot of time exploring all these mountains and the coastline, and everywhere you went, there were these beautiful shrines dedicated to local Shinto spirits, and each one of those had a story behind it and a history behind it, and that was a deep part of the inspiration for that, along with decades of martial arts training in sorry, my daughter is asking me a question and I don't actually know what it is. Did I go swimming in the ocean in Japan? I did sometimes, yeah. It was fun. It's a nice ocean. Bit cold. I can absolutely move my book so that you can draw there while I'm doing this. So I was deeply immersed in Japanese culture and history while I was there, and so I was inspired by it, and it sort of kicked off the whole idea behind Blade's Edge, the magic system, the martial arts involved, and a number of other pieces of the story. But I didn't want it to be actual Japan for a number of reasons. For one thing, I wanted to create a history for the world that was far more misogynistic than Japan's actual history, which takes some people by surprise, because I know a lot of people do think of Japan as a prime example of having issues with sexism currently, which is true to a large degree, but in fact is a more recent issue for Japan than it is for a lot of other countries. Anyways, that's a whole complicated thing. But that was a big part of why I wanted it to be a different place entirely, because I wanted to fabricate a history that was not at all Japanese history. And I also wanted to adjust the culture to the purposes of the story, right? And so I made up a new culture that's, inspired by, but is not based on the actual society. And I hope that I have done that in a way that, makes people, that it entertains people and that doesn't make anyone upset about what I've done because it's not Japan.
So a slightly more apparent connection then to the world of the story. The next question I'm going to ask is, this hero is a mom hero. And we have learned tonight during the broadcast, if we didn't know already, that you are a very active and involved mom of a small child. Why did you choose to write a book with a mom warrior as the hero? And do you see yourself in that character? Is that your fun self-insert? I'm kidding about that, except I'm totally not. Moms are heroes every day. And yeah, I want to know what gave you the mom hero idea?
It is and it isn't my fun self-insert. Honestly, the character that I've written that has the most of me in her is Victoria Marmot. But the character, this Torako, who is the mom warrior in this story, has a few pieces of me in her. That like her age, like I made her the same age. I gave her, she also struggles with ADHD. I have 2 ADHD characters in this book. And it's the first time I've ever intentionally written a character with ADHD. I have probably accidentally written an ADHD character in the past because I've like when I thought I was neurotypical, I was probably like, oh, this is a perfectly neurotypical character. Now that I know that's not the case, with a little more perspective on it. But I very intentionally gave some of those traits to 2 characters in the book. And Torako is one of them. And I gave her, I put her in a few situations that I have been in. But I also gave her a sword, which I don't normally carry around with me. Salty wolf sword, yeah. So, and then also she's just, she's a different person. I try not to actually write myself as most of my characters. Victoria Marmot is a very much self-insert fantasy period. Like that whole storyline is made to be that because I intentionally pulled on that trope from urban fantasy, which is often a self-insert type of deal. And so, yeah, so that's more of me actually putting myself into the character. But Torako differs from me in a lot of ways in terms of personality, but also has a number of my quirks. So, but I always do that. Like my main characters always share a couple of traits with me, be they, interests, hobbies, or talents, but I usually magnify them. Like if they're good at something, I usually make them way better than I am at the thing. Yeah. So, but in terms of why a mom, I actually wrote a whole essay for the Before We Go blog about how moms always get sidelined in SFF in general, and in many genres. Like there are very few genres where moms are often the main characters. And
I mean, moms are lucky to get sidelined rather than fridged, let's be real.
Right. No, and like that's an excellent point. And I have done that in my own stories because I've written YA, and it is hard when you're writing a young adult character who's supposed to go save the world. It's kind of hard to make that happen if their parents are still alive because
no, you'll be home by 8.
Well, or not even that, but just like, no, I'm going to fight alongside you. You're not going off to fight this whatever world. Like, can you imagine if your child was like, Mom, I got to go save the world. And you'd be like, okay, honey, see you later. And not like, okay, I'm going to come with you and help fight the thing because you're like, I don't care that you're a teenager. I'm still like, you don't get to go save the world by yourself.
Not in my car.
I'm going to go make sure. No, it's like, I'm going to go make sure that you're okay. So yeah, so I totally, Blade's Edge and Trader's Hope's main characters are largely orphans. And so I've done it. I'm guilty of it. I'm not saying it's a thing that people do with malice, but I do think that there's just like a weird lack of mom badass main characters, right? Like we do allow sometimes in SFF, the dude who has settled down and had a family gets pulled back into his career as an assassin, warrior, whatever, because someone does something, usually comes after his family, right? We don't usually let the woman do that. We don't usually let moms do that. And it's rare enough that we even let dads do that. But, and I would love to see more of that. But I would also I really want to see a bunch of moms kicking ass because moms kick so much ass. And there's nothing about being a mom that stops you from doing whatever thing you were doing. So we've got a hardened warrior character. She's in her late 30s. She's been fighting bandits to defend her valley for over 20 years. And she's a bit cynical and a bit jaded and a little too eager to put a sword in someone if she thinks it solves a problem. But she now she's recently become a mom in the last few years, and so she now has to do it all and balance having a toddler. And then like one of the primary pieces of this story is that she gets caught in a situation where she can't arrange childcare, and the kid has to come on the rescue mission. So, and that was really like, honestly, that scenario was part of the inciting incident for this story in my head. Like, and originally it was like the start of the book, and I now, for various reasons, start earlier as I opened the scope and brought in more characters. I wanted to have a few more perspectives, and it had to start a little bit earlier in order to have everything make sense. And but that's really, it's just like, you know, what if there were a mom warrior, first of all, and she's like, you know, been doing it a long time, but isn't retired, but is kind of like stepping a little bit back, and then what if she got dragged into it and also had to bring her kid? So yeah, those were the what ifs that started this. And it's the story I needed to write. I think, I mean, I kind of said that earlier, that 2020 was rough and I needed to write something fun, but I also just needed to write this book. Like, I am at a point in my own relationship with parenting that this was important to me, in reclaiming my identity and sort of just reinforcing the idea that, yeah, you can still be a parent. You can be a parent and still be your other identities, all your other identities, whatever those are.
I said when my son was born that I didn't know how to be a mom. Like, I don't know how to be mom. I don't know who that person is. I'm just me that also has a baby. And that's sort of been how I've been the whole time. People told me I would need a bigger car, and my answer was, babies are small.
Totally. I mean, we already had a stupid parent car anyway because we had a Prius, but someone was like, are you going to get a minivan? Like, why would I get a minivan?
No, so I love that you then took into sci-fi and fantasy. You took into this fantastical world that you had already established the character of, I don't know who mommy is. I'm just me, and I have a child, and this is my life. And now a child is adding to my life, not completely changing it and taking it over and making me into a different person. That I'm still a person. I'm still a woman. I'm still a warrior. I'm still a badass. He just happened to also have this small human that I have to arrange childcare for. And I also appreciate the lack of babysitting, even in sci-fi fantasy, right? We can't make you to suspend your disbelief too far.
It's, I have to admit, it was like, it wound up being a thing that worked out perfectly with the larger plot that actually carries into the next book. But taking away all the immediately available childcare, at first I was like, why is this even a thing? Like, I asked myself the question of like, okay, so she winds up needing to take the 3-year-old on a rescue mission, but why? Like,
because nobody can ever find a babysitter.
Well,
true.
But yeah, and so yeah, there are a lot of little pieces to that, but it's yeah, it was fun. It was fun to do. There's even a moment that, and this is not a spoiler at all, it's just a revelation of a scene that I really like. There's a moment where, because the warrior mom carries the kid on her back in a wrap sometimes. She's a small 3-year-old and can hang out back there. And also the warrior mom is a large person. So this is like, works out nicely when the kid's legs get tired. And there's one point when the chase has already begun and they're like hurriedly taking off to like go rescue other mom. Right? So it's Mama and Kasan, because Kasan is one of the mom names in Japanese. And so I had one of them be Mama and one of them be Kasan. Anyway, so they're chasing after Kasan, but they had like, okay, kid's tired, gotta put her in the wrap. And as soon as she gets her in the wrap, after like rearranging all her weapons and stuff, kid's like, I gotta pee. So she said, take her out of the wrap, let her pee, and then put her back in the wrap, and then run after mom. So just like, I wanted there to be real parenting moments in this. So
we have talked about a little bit about the world of this book, the fact that there are 2 other books that take place in this world. You brought up Victoria Mama earlier. We've heard the segment of this book which contains the same sort of beautiful prose that you do so well. Those things are all things that tend to tie your work together. Tell us what is different about this book from the things that we've seen from you before. What is new? What is different that we haven't already touched on? What is something that we need to know about?
This book is different on a couple of levels. For one thing, it's all adult protagonists, except for Itachi. Like I said, there are a few POV scenes from the toddler, but everybody else is in their, like, the youngest POV character is 28 and the oldest POV character is 37, I think. So around there. So like Blade's Edge and Traitor's Hope was a bunch of teenagers. The entire Victoria Marmot series is a bunch of teenagers. This is the first time that I have written main POV characters that are adults, and told a story that has much less to do with figuring out who you are as figuring out the relationships in your life. I think it's way more about family, both found and blood, than it is about coming of age or any of those things, right? So it is decidedly not YA. And that's a big difference. It is more romp-like. I've been calling it an action adventure fantasy romp. Because it is the world, Gensokai, is in a really dark place in the first two books. And it is moving, it is not there yet, but it is moving in the direction of a brighter, more hopeful world in this book. And also there's like some things being revealed about Gensokai's history that are very revelatory in terms of the whole like national consciousness of their own identity even. And so that part is kind of on the fringes of the beginning and end of the book, and the meat of the book is this chase, this rescue mission, right? But this kicks off a sub-series where what we're looking at is a bit of a zoom out, if you will, which I think I can say without giving it too many spoilers. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious from that first sea battle that I just read about. The Kaio keeps referring to foreign ships and other stuff. And if you've read Blade's Edge and Traitor's Hope, that's going to sound weird to you. You'd be like, wait, I thought Gensokai was the world. Interesting. Like I'm trying to read on to know more about that. But that is a big shift. And also just the lightheartedness of the whole story. Again, some darker issues still for sure. There's, I won't pretend that nobody dies or, this, but it's, I think overall the world, the setting, like Blade's Edge and Traitor's Hope are pretty dystopian is a good way to describe them, right? And this is less so. This is more just like the world itself, the setting is more hopeful. It allows for a more of a fantasy romp, more of an action adventure fantasy romp, which is, so I think there's a different shift there. Also, I drilled in on character voice really hard in the rewrite of this book, with intention. And I've gotten a couple reviews so far that have made it sound like I succeeded. So I'm very excited about that. I hope that each of these characters seemed really distinct. They were for me. And I'm I always try to do that on some level. I've never written a book and been like, oh, it's fine if these are all the same people. But but this was the first time where I sat down and because when I did the rewrite, I didn't shift a ton of stuff from the plot. But the reason I rewrote every scene from scratch was to nail down voice. I just knew the characters so much better at the end of the first draft, going into the second draft, it was a huge difference in the getting that tone right for each character. And like I said, from unprompted, one of the reviews really was oh my gosh, the character distinction, even though I was still struggling with names, I absolutely knew which character was speaking at the beginning of every chapter because the voices were so distinct. And I was like, yes, winning. So those are the differences, I would say.
Very cool. And I'm super excited by it. I do want to open it up to questions from our friends at home. If they have any, please drop those there in the YouTube chat. If you see me looking sideways, it's actually them checking in with the YouTube feed over here on my tiny little machine over here in the corner. If those friends who are watching from home all around the world have questions they want to ask you. But while we wait for them to type things, and also the 20-second
delay, yeah.
What's next from you? I know you're just happily launching this right now. You have mentioned a mini series also in this world. What else are we going to expect to see from you?
The next book in this sub-series which this is the book 1 of. So if it's timeline wise the book 3 in the overall Gensokai series, it is also the book 1 of this sub-series within. And so of Gensokai Kaigai. The second book thus far is titled Eredi's Gambit. And I think anyone who reads the book all the way through will understand that title as soon as they get there. But until then, it won't make any sense, and that's fine. I'm not going to explain it. I had written approximately 20% of the first draft on that book, and I'm really looking forward to writing the rest of it. It's going to do a lot of really fun things and go to some really fun places that I'm very excited to write about. Really going to hone in on how the world that Gensokai is set in is not Earth, and explore that some more, which will be really fun.
Will there be more sailboats?
Yeah. There will be. I think there's going to be a decent amount of seafaring in every book in this sub-series, I think, because that's going to be important. Some of it I might have to gloss over with and then X amount of time later they arrived, because you don't want to actually always spend 3 months on a boat with characters, but
this is true. This is very true. So, I mean, you don't even necessarily want to spend 3 months on a boat with your loved ones. So.
It might actually be more fun with characters, but it depends, because tight quarters, etc. Yes, so we'll see how much of it winds up on the page. There will definitely be some though, because there are going to be more sea battles. So fear not, there will be more sea battles, and I am really looking forward to that. And I'm also really looking forward to following yet another new set of characters in terms of POV characters. This book, as of right now, and anything could change because I've only written 20% of it and might get to the end of the book and decide that everything I'm talking about right now will actually be gone. I'll delete it and do something else entirely. But for now, the plan that I've got at present is that this book kind of starts before Sairō's Claw actually starts, but following a different set of characters, meets up with Sairō's Claw either at the middle or the end, depending on how much of the story I think needs to be told from before. So it'll either be a parallel book that ends at the same point, or it will be, maybe takes us a few scenes past, or it'll be a book that meets up in the middle, tease it, and then keeps going and carries us on. If I do the parallel and they meet up at the end, then there's at least one more book after that. And if not, if I do the T thing, then it might just be a 2-book series, or it might continue on. I have no idea yet. I really need to do something.
We do have some questions coming in from our audience at home. First is from Raoul Reeds. Which character was the hardest to write? And did any of them come really naturally?
That is a good question. I would say the hardest to write, just because it required the most focus, was the toddler. Because shifting into what I hope is toddler mindset. So first of all, I have one child to base this character off of. Yes, Cedar. I don't spend a ton of time with other kids, and so I didn't she's not that similar to my daughter, but she just I was just in terms of average, what I consider normal behavior for a child of that age. I use my own child as a model, and I have no idea if she's normal for her age. I don't spend enough time with other children. Cedar's now telling me something. I should have made her 4.5. You know what, kiddo? She'll eventually be 4.5. Um, but can we talk about it later? Yeah, just a little bit later. I'm just doing this interview. I know it is, sweetheart. I know. Cedar would really like to ask me about the character, but Sudie, it's really got to wait. Where'd Dada go? What's he doing?
Watching you on.
He's watching me, and can you go ask him? I know it's about the character. So it is about a really happy thing. So the character Itachi is, kiddo, can it wait? Can you ask me after? I would love to talk to you about it. Can you ask me after? I can't right now, sweetie, because I'm answering this other question. So Itachi is, she's not like based on my child in terms of her personality or anything. It just that she's like, I took her as inspiration for what a kid of that age would do. And when I started writing Itachi, my kid was 3.5, and now she's 4.5. So I was like, that even shifted, and I kept trying to like, I got to tone it down. Like, what was Cedar like, 6 months ago, a year ago, trying like in terms of vocabulary and like the level of complexity of sentences, etc. So focusing on that and trying to not use giant words, right? And the truth is, Cedar actually uses some pretty big words.
Yeah, I was about to say Mac would have not been a good example for that because.
But so I was trying to like take even, like I was like, man, like even though this is actually probably, I doubt it's even that abnormal, but it's like, but people are gonna be like, oh, no 3-year-old talks like that, And so just trying to like preemptively pull some of the larger vocabulary pieces away and write from that perspective, but also just like going into the mindset of like what is important to a 3-year-old, and then and trying to focus on that. It's much easier for me to like follow adult wants and needs and think about that, right? But so writing the few Itachi scenes were actually the hardest part. I enjoyed it, but they were much harder than anything else. And
our next question is the warrior mom gonna raise a warrior kid? Is the kid gonna grow up to be equally badass?
I mean, it's up to the kid, right? Like, she gets to choose what person she's going to become. I'm the author.
You get to make it up.
I do, but it's also down to her personality. She might turn into a warrior. She does. I will say this about Itachi: she does not want to just like sit back and let stuff happen around her or to her. She's very gung ho about being involved and stopping bad people from doing bad things. But she's also, she's 3.5, so she's like, there's more that she can do more than the average 3.5-year-old might, because she's got a lot of kiso, which is the kind of magic in this world, and that's sort of like her parents keep running into that because they're like, like we don't have any kiso and you have so much and we don't even know what to do with you. And so that's an additional thing that they're dealing with as parents. So yeah, I don't know. It's a mystery. We'll see what happens. She grows up and what, maybe she decides that's a good thing to do. Maybe she decides she wants to do something else.
Maybe we'll just have to keep buying books.
Yeah.
And with that, we are at the 1 hour mark.
Yep. Which is, probably a good time to stop, but it's not a hard cutoff. But right? You probably want to go to bed. So
coming in from our YouTube audience, and I am mostly seeing just people who are reading the book and super excited. I will remind folks that are reading the book, if you are enjoying what you're reading, please, please, please pop a rating or review over at Goodreads, Amazon.com, anywhere you can buy books and review books. And if you are not enjoying it, we would thank you to keep that to yourself. I'm kidding.
Actually, if you want to write a thoughtful bad review, I appreciate that too, because honestly, the things that you dislike about the book, someone else might love. And so if you actually detail the things that are not working for you, that can actually help sell books. So you don't only have to leave a review. You don't have to leave a review at all. We appreciate all reviews. Honest reviews are lovely, and you are welcome to mention the things that didn't work for you. If you're gonna just say, 1 star, I hated it, I mean, whatever, you do you, but that's less appreciated.
We like that slightly less. Yes, be honest, but be kind. Please remember that authors work very hard to get words on pages in pandemics with children and pets and spouses and the world going crazy. And we definitely appreciate your kind words, even if they are critical of the work that has been done. Kindness is key. But also thank you for buying the book. Thank you for all the pre-orders. I know there was a hot mess that went on with pre-orders, and the heroic fan community came together and were able to make amends for that and get everything back in order in time. So thank you to everyone who pre-ordered twice. Thank you everyone who has bought the book, is reading the book, and thank you to everyone who's joined us here tonight.
Yeah, but before we wrap up, I do want to say, everyone who is here right now, if you are watching, please drop a comment in the live chat so that we can see that you're here while it's live. Even if it's just to say hi, you don't have to come up with anything eloquent. You can just say hi, or I'm here, or hello, anything you like. But everyone who's here in the live chat, you will be entered to win a digital copy of all 3 of the Gensokai books. So Blade's Edge, Traitor's Hope, and Sairō's Claw. So I will choose from all the people who have commented a winner later, probably tomorrow, after the live chat comes back online after we end this. So 24 hours from now, I will announce a winner. But if you are here and watching, please, please, please say hi. It's not, you don't have to do anything. You could type a period and click enter. I just need your name so that I can let you know that you've won. Yeah, a heart. Very good. Rachel Drummer's putting in a heart. So go ahead and throw those on there, and I will choose one winner to get the entire digital Gensokai collection. And that is signing. I'm gonna do a signing piece, which, don't worry, Amanda, you don't have to stick around for it if you don't want to. But if anyone would like to talk to me for a minute and have me do a signed bookplate for you, then please, I'm going to put the invite to the Zoom in here, and Amanda's probably going to run because she needs, I think she has a time constraint and needs to leave.
I have to make sure the child, gets fed and put to sleep and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate to have a super supportive spouse who actually cooked dinner on the grill tonight, but
oh, lovely.
That is.
So I'm going to plop the Zoom invite into the chat. If anyone would like to say hi and chat, and I will write down personal details and send you a signed bookplate, which my laptop is actually sitting on top of the stack of bookplates that I will be signing, then they can do that. And so you can come on in and join the Zoom, and I will chat with people a little bit and sign some bookplates and take some personal details if you're into that. If you are not into that, that's totally fine. And that will, when I end the stream, will be the end of the event. But if you click on the Zoom link and join us over here, then you can hang out with me for as long as you like. Well, no, not for as long as, for a couple minutes.
Like, Fear's not gonna, yeah, not all night. Come on.
But Amanda, thank you so much for interviewing me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Super glad to be here. Thrilled for you and your new book that just sounds amazing. It is near the top of my TBR pile. Aww. That is like the most unending thing ever. Like they don't tell you when you start writing books that you don't have time to read anymore, and yet you're going to learn about all these amazing books from all these great people, and you want to read all of it, and you're like, what hours, when do I do this?
I am, my TBR pile, I'm lucky that most of it's digital, or it would definitely kill me in my sleep, because there are hundreds of books and they would just collapse on top of me, and that would be the end of me. Yeah,
probably half and half, and it's very, very frightening.
That's intense. Yeah. But yeah, that's sweet of you. I hope you get a chance to read it at some point, and I hope you like it.
Sailboats. You had me at sailboats.
Yay! Sweet. If nothing else, I've got you with the sailing.
Right, you had me as soon as you were on Twitter talking about, like, so if it's rigged like this and we do this. I'm like, oh, hey, you're speaking my language. All right, let's talk sailboats.
Yeah, I had to think about it because in terms of like using the magic to move the boats, I'm like, oh crap, what kind of rigging do I need to be able to have it like safely manipulated by whatever wind you want? Anyway, it's a whole other issue.
Magic. The best thing about magic is that you get to make it up.
It's true. But there are some constraints, so.
Well, yeah, you have to make it functional, but you still get to make it up.
Yeah.
All right, I am gonna bail.
Yeah, totally fair.
I will see you very soon. And once again, thanks to everyone over on YouTube for joining us tonight.
And thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Bye. All right, folks, it's just me. If anyone wants to come join the signing line, hop on in. I will end the stream in a minute. I'm just going to leave it up long enough for people to jump on if they want to. But it looks to me like no one's coming, which is totally fine. You can also order personalized nameplates, bookplates from my website, which is virginiamcclain.ca. And if you go to /online store, then you can order hardcovers from me and signed bookplates. The hardcovers go straight from the printer to your door, and the bookplates I sign here and then mail them in an envelope to you, also to your door. So if anyone wants to join me, awesome. And if not, totally fine. But I'm going to wrap this up if no one's going to hop on. And I will end the live stream. And if no one joins the Zoom link before then, you might lose the Zoom link once I hit end. So there are some people coming. Yay. So I'm going to leave that up for just a moment. If you don't want your video on, because I'm going to leave this on YouTube for just a minute, then please don't turn your video on until it's just the two of us, or the however many of us there are that show up. So if anyone else wants to come, we've got at least one person in line. So come on in if you want to chat with me and get a signed bookplate, and I'll be ending the live stream in just a second, 30 seconds or so. So again, as you come in, if you want to leave your video off or turn it on, it's entirely up to you. Hi, Rachel. You're technically on YouTube right now because I haven't ended the stream yet. Just leaving it on to see if anybody else wants to come in. But so far, so no one. And all right, folks, your last chance. There's one person who's come to chat with me. Anyone else? Anyone else? All right. I'm going to end the live stream. Thank you all so much for coming. Really had a lovely time. Thanks for asking questions. Thanks for listening to me read. And I'm now going to talk to the one person who's here.